Let me go to Jim in Allentown. Hello, Jim. You're on the Glenn Beck program.
Hi, Glenn. Thanks for taking my call. I listened to you here this morning like I do every morning, and I'm looking at the local paper, and it's got a story out of the Associated Press of Washington, D.C. It says, military classes suspended for critical view of Islam. And this Army Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Dooley was teaching this class, and he says you got to look at Islam as an ideology rather than just a religion. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Martin Dempsey pulled the class and suspended it, and said they had to review it after a student complaint. Who was a student?
Well, I don't know. I don't know who.
Military. If you don't know your enemy's heart, you don't know how to combat them.
Look, Jim, you're exactly right on this. We used to teach communism. We used to teach what communism was. We used to be able to say what communism was. Communism is a godless killing machine. That's all it is. It enslaves people and it kills people. And we used to teach the truth about communism when they were our enemy. We can't teach anything about Islam. Well, if you don't know how Islam over in the Middle East is really nothing but a political organ, that it is a theocracy in waiting, that it is about power and control, and it is about submission by the sword. If you can't teach that, if we can't get inside our enemies' heads, well, then how do you possibly fight it? You don't even know what you're fighting anymore. Because that's the distinction, right? I mean, you have this in the Middle East, they've created essentially on top of the religion a political system. And you can't, since it's named the same thing and they call it the same thing and they use the religious part of it for power in the political sense, you can't criticize it because your ass said that you're going to be you're criticizing the religion part of it. How can you possibly say that the Muslim Brotherhood is secular? How can you possibly say that when the guy who's running the Muslim Brotherhood and running for the president of Egypt is actually coming out and saying, well, we only have one constitution, and that is the Quran. We have one law, and that is Sharia. We have one responsibility, and that is jihad. And our main goal in life is to die for Allah. Now, that sounds largely secular to you. I mean, it doesn't to me at all. And the first tip-off is the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, if you can't teach what it means to the Muslim Brotherhood, what it means to them, what the Quran means to them, and how to identify, well, then what do we really, honestly, what are we fighting? To go over and say, we're just going to fight the Germans. We're fighting Germans. That's all we're fighting, Germans. No, you're not. You're fighting Nazism. You weren't fighting the Germans. You were fighting Nazism. We weren't fighting the Russians. Do you remember after the Soviet Union fell, we were all like, the Russians are really cool. Take back Yakov Smirnov. But the Russians are pretty cool. They're just like us. It was their government. It was the government's ideology that we were fighting. That is what needs to be taught. And we find that over and over again when we go over in wars and our soldiers go over there and they start taking out the government and then they go into a village and there's normal people in the village. What happens? They give them candy and they hug the soldiers. It happens over and over and over again wherever we go. And that's because we're good people and they're good people. But when you get these overarching, really aggressive governments that crush their people and threaten the rest of the world, that's the problem we have. And that's the problem you have to have with political Islam in the Middle East. It's amazing to me. What are we not fighting dictators anymore? Are we not fighting ideology? Are we only fighting people? How can we have hate crimes if we can't figure out what causes those people to hate? How's that possible? We're just fighting people. There's no such thing as a hate crime now, I guess.